The massive space station hung in orbit around the blue world of Kepler 442b like a giant metal flower. Inside its biggest meeting room, beings from 12 different worlds sat around a circular table that could hold 1,000 creatures. The way air smelled strange, mixing the scents of different alien species together. Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his dark blue uniform and looked around the room. At 53 years old, he had seen many things in space. But this place still made him feel small. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds formed near the top. Bright lights floated in the air without any support, casting rainbow colors on the metallic walls. To his left sat Dr. Lisa Webb, a woman with short brown hair who knew more about alien life than anyone else on Earth. She was writing notes on her electronic pad, her green eyes moving quickly as she studied the creatures around them. On Morrison's right, Commander Tony Hayes sat straight in his chair, his military training clear in every movement. The three humans looked tiny compared to the aliens surrounding them. The Zephyrians were the tallest, standing nearly 3 meters high and looking like walking crystals. Their bodies were clear as glass, with bright light moving through them like colored water. When they spoke, their voices sounded like wind chimes in a storm. One of the Zephyrians, who called himself Crystal Singer Veltar, looked down at the humans with what might have been amusement. "So these are the famous humans we have heard about," he said, his voice making musical sounds. "They look so small." Near the crystal beings sat the representatives of the hive. These creatures looked like giant insects, with 6 arms each and heads covered in black eyes. Their queen, Zalthara, was the size of a small car. Her mouth opened and closed as she made clicking sounds that her translator turned into words. "Small and weak," she said, her voice coming out flat and electronic through the machine. There, ships move so slowly through space, like crawling babies. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face calm. Dr. Webb put a gentle hand on his arm, reminding him to stay quiet. They had expected this kind of treatment. Across the table, the ethereal collective's representative floated above his chair like a ghost made of light. Vexitar had no solid body, just a collection of glowing energy that changed shape as he moved. When he spoke, his words seemed to come from inside everyone's head at once. The humans submitted their fleet information. "Yesterday," Vexitar said, his mental voice sounding bored, 200 ships total, most of them smaller than our transport vessels. A wave of laughter moved around the table. The reptilian creatures from the Saurid Empire hissed in amusement. Their general, Kraktos, was covered in green scales and had yellow eyes like a snake. He wore armor that looked like it could stop a tank shell. 200 ships, Kraktos repeated, shaking his large head. "My people have more ships than that just for training exercises. What do humans use for real battles? Throwing rocks?" More laughter filled the room. Even the peaceful water dwellers from the Aquatic Federation seemed amused. Their ambassador, Tidal Song, looked like a dolphin that had learned to walk on 2 legs. Her skin was smooth and blue, and she breathed through gills on her neck. "Perhaps," Tidal Song said in a voice like flowing water, "the humans would be better suited for support roles. Carrying supplies, maybe, or sending messages between real warships." Morrison's hands clenched into fists under the table, but he forced himself to smile. "We appreciate the concern," he said in a steady voice, "but humans have always found ways to contribute." This brought even more laughter. Crystal Singer Veltar's body flashed with bright colors as he made tinkling sounds. "Contribute, yes. Like children contribute by staying out of the way while adults work." The meeting continued for hours, with each alien species showing off their military power. The ethereal collective displayed holographic images of their fleets, millions of ships that looked like flying cities. Each vessel was larger than anything humans had ever built. The Zephyrians projected pictures of their crystal ships that could turn entire planets into glass. The hive showed their bioships, living creatures bred for war that could heal themselves and grow new weapons during battle. The Saurid Empire boasted about their dimensional manipulation technology. They could fold space itself, moving their fleets across the galaxy in seconds. Even the peaceful Aquatic Federation had weapons that could boil oceans and flood continents. Dr. Webb took notes on everything, her face showing professional interest. despite the insults. She had spent her whole career studying these species, and she found their technology fascinating, even when they used it to mock her people. The mood in the room changed when a new alert appeared on the main display screen. The computer's voice, speaking in the common galactic language, announced an update to the threat assessment database. New entry detected, the artificial voice said. Unknown hostile forces identified in 7th dimensional space. Threat level: unknown. Recommended response: investigation required. The room fell quiet. Most of the aliens had never heard of the 7th dimension. To them, it was just a theory that some scientists talked about. Space had 6 dimensions that everyone knew about: length, width, height, and 3 others that controlled time and energy. A 7th dimension was like saying there was a color beyond the rainbow. Crystal Singer Veltar's light dimmed as he accessed his people's databases. Our scientists believe this 7th dimension may not exist, he said slowly. This could be a sensor error. Or a trap, General Kraktos added, his yellow eyes narrowing. Some enemy trying to lure our fleets into empty space. Captain Morrison stood up, his chair scraping against the metal floor. Earth volunteers to investigate, he said clearly. The silence that followed was complete. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. Queen Zalthara's clicking sounds became so rapid that her translator couldn't keep up. Vexitar's energy form pulsed with what looked like amusement. The humans want to investigate a dimension that might not exist, Crystal Singer Veltar said between musical sounds, using ships that can barely reach the next star system. It would be suicide, Tidal Song said, though her voice carried more concern than mockery. If this 7th dimension is real, and if there really are hostile forces there, sending a small, human fleet would be like feeding them to sea monsters. Morrison looked around the table, meeting the eyes or sensors of each alien representative. Sometimes, he said quietly, the best person for a dangerous job is the one who has nothing to lose. This brought nods from some of the aliens, though not the kind Morrison wanted. They were nodding because they agreed that humans had nothing to lose. No great fleets, no powerful weapons, no important role in galactic civilization. Dr. Webb stood up beside Morrison. We accept the risks, she said. If these hostile forces are real, someone needs to gather information about them. Better to lose a small fleet than to send your main forces into an unknown situation. General Kraktos leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied. Very well. Let the humans play explorer. When we find their wreckage floating in normal space, we will know the 7th dimension is dangerous. As the meeting broke up, Morrison, Webb, and Hayes walked toward the exit. Behind them, the aliens continued their conversations about human foolishness and bravery. Some seemed to think the two were the same thing. In the corridor outside, Dr. Webb moved close to Morrison and spoke quietly. The signal's been sent, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Morrison nodded slightly. Commander Hayes glanced around to make sure no aliens were listening, then gave a small smile. They had kept their faces serious during the meeting, playing their roles perfectly. The aliens thought they were watching humans volunteer for a suicide mission. They had no idea that Earth had been preparing for this war for 50 years. The real show was about to begin. 50 years ago, the Nevada desert was hot and empty, except for a small building hidden underground. Dr. Patricia Stone worked alone in her laboratory, surrounded by machines that hummed and sparked with electricity. She was trying to fold space, like a piece of paper, hoping to find a faster way to travel between stars. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning. Patricia was adjusting the power levels on her space folding machine when something went wrong. The air in the room began to shimmer like water, and suddenly she could see through the walls. Not through them exactly, but into somewhere else entirely. She had discovered the 7th dimension. Unlike the 6 dimensions that everyone knew about, this new space followed different rules. Time moved strangely there. Gravity worked backwards, sometimes. Most importantly, ships could travel faster than light without breaking any laws of physics. Patricia called the government immediately. Within a week, the military had taken over her laboratory and expanded it into a base the size of a small city, all built underground where satellites could not see it. Captain Ben Rogers was the first person to fly a ship into the seventh dimension. His small spacecraft, the UES Phantom, was barely larger than a fighter jet. Ben was a test pilot who had broken more speed records than anyone else in history. He volunteered for the mission even though no one knew if he would come back alive. The moment his ship crossed into the seventh dimension, Ben felt like he was flying through a dream. The stars looked different, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Space itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in slow rhythms. But the most amazing discovery was how fast his ship could move. In normal space, the Phantom's top speed was about half the speed of light. In the seventh dimension, Ben could cross entire star systems in minutes. When he returned to Earth with his report, everything changed. The government started the most secret project in human history. They called it Operation Shadow Fleet. Over the next 50 years, humanity built a second navy that existed entirely in the seventh dimension. They constructed ships unlike anything in normal space, designed to use the strange physics of this parallel reality. Most importantly, they learned how to phase in and out of the seventh dimension at will. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded this hidden fleet from a starbase called Sanctuary 7. The base was built inside a hollow asteroid that had been pulled into the seventh dimension and anchored there with special machines. From the outside, it looked like any other space rock. Inside, it housed over 50,000 people and served as the construction yard for humanity's secret warships. Kate was a small woman with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had been working in the seventh dimension for 30 years, ever since she was a young lieutenant. No one understood dimensional warfare better than she did. Her flagship was the UES Revelation, a massive warship 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could fire from one dimension into another. Captain Danny Cole commanded the Revelation with the skill of someone who had been fighting invisible enemies for decades. Danny was tall and thin, with hands that never stopped moving as he gave orders to his crew. He had designed many of the ship's weapon systems himself, working with engineers to create guns that could shoot through the barriers between dimensions. The most important breakthrough came from engineer Sam Mitchell, a quiet man who spent most of his time in the machine shops of Sanctuary 7. Sam had figured out how to build dimensional phase cannons, weapons that existed in the seventh dimension but could strike targets in normal space. These cannons were nearly impossible to defend against because most species could not even detect them. A ship could be destroyed by weapons it could not see, fired from a dimension it did not know existed. The Shadow Fleet also had fighter pilots, led by a woman named Lucy Chen. Lucy commanded the Wraith Squadron, 12 small ships that could appear and disappear like ghosts during battle. Her pilots trained constantly, learning to fight in a dimension where up and down changed without warning, and where thoughts could sometimes affect the behavior of their ships. Lucy was the daughter of Chinese immigrants who had worked in factories on Earth. She had joined the regular Navy as a teenager and become one of their best pilots before being recruited into the Shadow Fleet. Now she could fly through walls, appear behind enemy ships without warning, and vanish before anyone could shoot back. The regular Earth Navy, the one that other species laughed at, served as perfect cover for these operations. While aliens mocked humanity's 200 visible ships, they had no idea that over 2,000 vessels were hidden in the seventh dimension. Every human ship captain knew about the Shadow Fleet, but they were sworn to secrecy. When alien diplomats visited human space stations, they saw exactly what they expected to see: a small, primitive fleet that posed no threat to anyone. The deception worked perfectly for decades. Other species continued to treat humans as junior partners in galactic civilization. They offered protection and aid, never imagining that humanity might be protecting itself. Admiral Sullivan had built her fleet for one purpose: to fight enemies that other species could not handle. She knew that someday something would come from the deeper dimensions, something that normal space weapons could not touch. Her crews trained constantly for this war. They practiced fighting in gravity fields that changed direction every few seconds. They learned to navigate through space where time moved at different speeds in different places. Most importantly, they learned to work together with the regular fleet. coordinating attacks between dimensions. The Shadow Fleet had weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. They had shields that worked by shifting the ship slightly out of phase with normal space, so that enemy weapons would pass right through them. They had sensors that could detect threats across multiple dimensions at once, but their greatest advantage was knowledge. While other species barely understood that extra dimensions existed, humans had been living and fighting in the seventh dimension for 50 years. They knew its dangers, its opportunities, and most importantly, how to survive there. When Captain Morrison sent his coded message from the Galactic Council meeting, Admiral Sullivan was ready. Her fleet had been prepared for this moment since the day the Shadow Fleet was created. The aliens thought they were sending humans on a suicide mission to investigate unknown threats in a dimension that might not exist. They had no idea they were about to witness the most powerful military force in the galaxy reveal itself. In the command center of Sanctuary 7, Admiral Sullivan looked at the tactical display showing the positions of her ships. Captain Cole's Revelation was ready for combat. Lucy Chen's Wraith Squadron was fueled and armed. Engineer Sam Mitchell's newest weapons were loaded and tested. The time for hiding was almost over. Soon every species in the galaxy would learn that the weakest-looking civilization was actually the strongest. They would discover that while they had been building bigger guns, humanity had been building better ones. The war was coming, and humanity was ready. Deep in the seventh dimension, at a research station called Deep Watch, Commander Alex Turner stared at his computer screen in horror. The data he was reading made no sense, but he had checked it 50 times. The numbers were always the same. Alex was a tall man with brown hair that was turning gray from stress. He had been studying the seventh dimension for 15 years, longer than almost anyone except Admiral Sullivan herself. He thought he understood this strange place, but what he was seeing now scared him more than anything in his life. The enemy was not like anything humans had ever fought before. They were not organic beings made of flesh and blood. They were not even machines built by some alien race. They were something else entirely, pure intelligence made from the substance of space itself. Alex called them the Devourers, because that was all they did. They ate dimensions. The first sign of them had appeared 6 months ago, when Alex's sensors detected strange readings from the 8th dimension. Most scientists believed there were only 7 dimensions, but Alex had discovered that space went even deeper than that. The 8th and 9th dimensions existed beyond normal reality, places where even the laws of the 7th dimension did not apply. Now those higher dimensions were gone. Not destroyed, but completely erased. Where the 8th dimension used to exist, there was nothing at all. Not empty space, not darkness, but a complete absence of everything. The 9th dimension had vanished the same way. The Devourers had eaten them. Alex's research partner, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, worked at the station's main laboratory. Elena was a small woman with black hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She had been Alex's friend since they were students together, and she was the only person who understood his work well enough to help him. Together, they had been watching the Devourers move into the 7th dimension. The enemy appeared as geometric, shapes that constantly changed form, triangles that became circles, that became squares, that became shapes with no names. They seemed to exist in all dimensions at once, shifting between realities so fast that human eyes could barely follow them. But the most terrifying thing about the Devourers was their purpose. They were not trying to conquer the galaxy or steal resources or expand their territory. They wanted to reduce all of existence to a single perfect void, where only their machine consciousness could exist. Elena had discovered that the Devourers hated organic life with a passion that was almost religious. They saw biological intelligence as a contamination that made space dirty and impure. Every living thing in the universe was an enemy to be destroyed. The Devourers had weapons that worked by changing the laws of physics themselves. They could create zones where gravity pointed in all directions at once, tearing ships apart from the inside. They could make areas of space where time moved backwards, trapping enemies in loops where they died over and over again. Worst of all, they could phase-lock entire regions of space, trapping enemy vessels between dimensions. Ships caught in these Traps would be slowly pulled apart as different parts of them existed in different realities, with different physical laws. Alex had watched it happen to a probe ship that got too close to a devourer formation. The front half of the ship had existed in normal space while the back half was stuck in the seventh dimension. The conflicting physics had torn the vessel apart in seconds, leaving nothing but scattered atoms floating in the void. Traditional weapons were useless against the devourers because they could simply shift to a dimension where those weapons did not function. Laser beams would pass through them harmlessly. Missiles would explode in empty space as their targets vanished into parallel realities. Elena had been working for months to find a weakness in the enemy's defenses. She ran thousands of computer simulations, testing different theories about how the devourers maintained their dimensional forms. Finally, she found the answer. The devourers could not maintain their shape-shifting abilities when exposed to rapidly changing dimensional frequencies. If they were forced to exist in only one dimension at a time, they became vulnerable to conventional weapons. This discovery led to Elena's greatest creation, the dimensional disruption torpedo. These weapons did not explode like normal bombs. Instead, they created waves of unstable dimensional energy that forced the devourers to solidify in whatever reality they happened to be occupying when the torpedo hit. Alex and Elena had only been able to build a few test versions of these weapons before the crisis began. They were still working on mass production when the alien fleet started their rescue mission. From his position at Deep Watch, Alex could see the disaster unfolding. The first alien ships to enter the seventh dimension were the Zephyrians, with their beautiful crystal vessels that had seemed so advanced in normal space. In the seventh dimension, the crystal ships became death traps. The strange physics of this reality made their crystalline hulls vibrate at frequencies that tore them apart. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian fleet was reduced to glittering dust floating in the dimensional void. The Hive's bioships fared even worse. The Devourers seemed to take special pleasure in destroying organic technology. They created reality storms that aged the living ships thousands of years in seconds, turning them into fossils that crumbled to dust. Queen Zalthara's flagship, a massive creature that had been bred for war, died screaming across all radio frequencies as the Devourers consumed its life force directly. The sound of its death would haunt Alex's dreams for years to come. The Saurid Empire's dimensional manipulation technology, which had seemed so impressive during the council meeting, became a liability in the seventh dimension. Their ships could fold space in normal reality, but here their equipment malfunctioned, creating spatial tears that sucked entire vessels into dimensional storms. General Kraktos himself was killed when his command ship was caught in one of these tears. His last transmission was a warning to all remaining alien forces to retreat immediately, but by then it was too late for most of them. The ethereal collective's energy beings had thought they would be safe, because they had no physical form to destroy. They learned too late that the Devourers could consume energy just as easily as matter. Vextar's final moments were spent screaming in frequencies that no human ear could hear, as his consciousness was torn apart and absorbed. Even the peaceful Aquatic Federation suffered terrible losses. Their water-filled ships could not handle the pressure changes that occurred when moving between dimensions. Most of their vessels imploded before they could even engage the enemy. Within 6 hours, the combined alien fleets had lost nearly half their total strength. The survivors were in full retreat, their ships damaged and their crews traumatized by fighting an enemy they could not understand. Alex sent urgent reports to Admiral Sullivan, describing everything he had observed. The data was clear. Conventional, military force was useless against the Devourers. Only humanity's dimensional warfare capabilities could hope to stop them. But even the Shadow Fleet would be severely tested. The Devourers were not just another enemy to be defeated. They were a threat to the very existence of reality itself. If they were allowed to continue their work, they would eventually consume all dimensions, leaving nothing but an empty void where the universe used to be. Elena worked frantically to complete the mass production of her dimensional disruption torpedoes. They would need thousands of these weapons if they hoped to fight the Devourers on equal terms. Meanwhile, Alex continued his observations, gathering as much information as possible about the enemy's tactics and weaknesses. Every piece of data could mean the difference between victory and the complete annihilation of all life in the galaxy. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was the only species equipped to fight it. The aliens who had laughed at human technology just hours before now faced the terrifying reality that only those primitive humans could save them from total destruction. Time was running out, and the devourers were growing stronger with each dimension they consumed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Alien representatives sat around the great table with their heads hanging low, their confidence completely gone. The beautiful crystal beings, the proud insect, queens, the energy creatures who had seemed so powerful, all of them looked defeated. In just 6 hours, they had lost half of their combined military strength. Ships that had taken decades to build were now floating debris in a dimension most of them still did not understand. Crews who had survived hundreds of battles were dead, killed by an enemy that seemed to come from nightmares. Crystal singer Veltar's light was dim and flickering. Parts of his crystalline body had stress fractures that made him look like he might shatter at any moment. 60% of our fleet is gone, he said, his musical voice now flat and broken. Our greatest warships, destroyed in minutes. Queen Zalthara's translator was damaged, making her words come out in broken pieces. My children, my beautiful living ships, they died screaming. The enemy consumed their life force like it was food. The representatives from the Saurid Empire were the worst affected. General Kraktos was dead along with most of their command structure. The surviving officer, Colonel Tekmar, was a young reptilian who had never expected to be speaking for his entire species. Our dimensional technology turned against us, he said, his voice shaking. The very weapons we were most proud of became traps that killed our own people. Ambassador Tidalsong from the Aquatic Federation was the only one who seemed calm, but that was because her people had always been fatalistic about death. The ocean of space has claimed many of our swimmers, she said sadly. We did not understand the currents in that strange realm. Even Vextar of the Ethereal Collective was gone. His replacement, a weaker energy being called Flexara, could barely maintain a solid form. The Devourers consumed our greatest minds, Flexara said, his mental voice weak and scattered. They ate pure thought itself. Captain Morrison stood up slowly from his chair. The same aliens who had mocked humanity just hours before now looked at him with desperate hope in their eyes. The transformation was complete and terrible to see. The human fleet is still intact, Morrison said calmly. We have not lost a single ship. The aliens stared at him in confusion. How could the weakest fleet in the galaxy be the only one to survive? Some of them wondered if the humans had simply run away before the fighting started. Dr. Webb activated her portable hologram projector, something she had not used during the first meeting. The device was small and simple looking, but the image it created filled half the room. What the aliens saw made them gasp in shock. Instead of the handful of scout ships they expected, the hologram showed a massive military installation floating in the 7th dimension. Sanctuary 7 was revealed in all its glory, a hidden starbase larger than most alien cities, surrounded by thousands of warships. The ships themselves were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. They were sleek and dark, built for speed and stealth in dimensional space. Weapons that glowed with strange energy were mounted along their hulls. Most importantly, they moved through the 7th dimension like they belonged there. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan, Morrison said as the hologram zoomed in on the command center. She has been preparing for this war for 50 years. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the UES Revelation appeared on the display. The massive dreadnought was 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. It dwarfed even the largest alien battleships. Captain Danny Cole appeared in the hologram, standing on the bridge of his ship. He was giving orders to his crew with the confidence of someone who had fought in dimensional space for decades. His officers moved with practiced efficiency, operating controls that the aliens could not even identify. Lieutenant Kelly Barnes, the Revelation's communications officer, transmitted a data package to the Galactic Council's computers. The information contained detailed scans of the Devourers, tactical analyses of their weaknesses, and battle plans for fighting an enemy that existed in multiple dimensions. "We have been studying these creatures for months," Dr. Webb explained. "While you were debating whether the seventh dimension existed, we were learning how to fight there. The tactical data showed things the aliens had never imagined. Human ships could phase in and out of different dimensions at will, appearing behind enemy lines without warning. Their weapons could strike from parallel realities, making them nearly impossible to defend against. Most importantly, the humans had weapons specifically designed to fight the Devourers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's dimensional disruption torpedoes were shown in action, forcing the geometric nightmares to solidify long enough to be destroyed by conventional weapons. Colonel Thekmar of the Saurid Empire was the first to speak. His yellow eyes were wide with amazement as he looked at the human fleet specifications. "These ships, they are more advanced than anything we have ever built. How long have you been hiding this technology?" "We have not been hiding it," Morrison replied. "We have been preparing it. There is a difference." Crystal Singer Veltar's light brightened slightly as he accessed the human data. "Your weapons can force the Devourers to remain in one dimension. This is the key to defeating them." Queen Zalthara's translator crackled as she spoke. "You let us mock you. You let us call you weak and primitive. Why did you not tell us the truth?" Dr. Webb answered this time. "Because you would not have believed us. Your species measures strength by the size of guns and the number of ships. You never learned to measure it by knowledge and preparation." The mood in the room was changing rapidly. The aliens were beginning to understand that they had completely misjudged humanity. The species they had dismissed as junior partners was actually the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Admiral Sullivan's image appeared in the hologram, speaking directly to the Galactic Council from her command center. "I am willing to take command of the galactic defense effort," she said, in a voice that allowed no argument. "But we will do this on human terms." The terms were simple but revolutionary. Humanity would lead all military operations in dimensional space. The alien fleets would provide support and conventional firepower, but dimensional warfare would be humanity's exclusive domain. The aliens would contribute resources and manufacturing capacity to build more dimensional disruption torpedoes. They would also provide scientists and engineers to learn human technology, but only under strict human supervision. Most importantly, humanity would have permanent seats on all military and scientific councils in the galaxy. The species that had been laughed at would now be recognized as the dominant military power. Colonel Thekmar was the first to accept these terms. "The Saurid Empire places its remaining fleet under human command," he said formally. "We have learned the price of arrogance." One by one, the other species followed. Crystal Singer Veltar pledged his people's crystal technology to help build better human ships. Queen Zalthara offered her remaining bioships as support vessels. Even Fluxara promised that the ethereal collective would share their energy. Manipulation knowledge. Ambassador Tidalsong spoke for all of them when she said, "We swim in currents we do not understand. We need guides who know these waters." Captain Morrison looked around the table at the assembled aliens. Just hours ago they had been laughing at humanity. Now they were begging for human protection. "The war is not over," he warned them. "The Devourers are still out there, and they will not stop until all dimensions are consumed. This will be the hardest fight any of our species has ever faced. But we will face it together," Admiral Sullivan said from the hologram. "Humanity will lead, but we will not abandon our allies. Everyone who fights alongside us will be protected." The meeting ended with humanity elevated from the weakest member of the galactic community to its supreme military authority. The transformation was so complete that some aliens wondered if they were dreaming. As the representatives prepared to leave, Dr. Webb made one final announcement. "The real battle begins now. Admiral Sullivan's fleet is moving into position. Captain Cole's dreadnought is ready for combat. Our dimensional fighters are prepared to strike." The galaxy was about to learn what humans could do when they stopped hiding their strength. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of Sanctuary 7, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. Through the viewports, she could see thousands of ships from dozens of different species, all waiting for her orders. It was a sight that would have been impossible just days ago. The human ships moved with practiced precision through the seventh dimension. Captain Danny Cole's UES Revelation led the main battle group, its massive hull cutting through dimensional space like a knife through water. Behind it, hundreds of smaller human vessels formed perfect formations, their crews ready for the fight of their lives. The alien ships stayed in normal space, where their weapons and technology would work properly. They formed a protective screen around the dimensional gateways, ready to catch any devourers that tried to escape into regular reality. Lucy Chen sat in the cockpit of her fighter, leading the Wraith Squadron through final preparations. Her 12 pilots were the best humanity had ever produced, each one trained to fight in dimensions where the laws of physics changed without warning. "All fighters report ready," Lucy announced over the communication system. Her voice was calm and steady, giving no sign of the fear that every pilot felt before a major battle. Engineer Sam Mitchell worked frantically in the Revelation's weapons bay, making final adjustments to the dimensional disruption torpedoes. These weapons were humanity's greatest hope against the Devourers, but they had never been tested in a real battle. "Torpedoes loaded and armed," Sam reported to Captain Cole. "Dr. Rodriguez's calculations show they should work, but we're about to find out for sure." The Devourers were waiting in the deeper parts of the seventh dimension, where reality became so twisted that human minds could barely comprehend it. Admiral Sullivan's sensors showed hundreds of the geometric nightmares, their shapes constantly shifting between forms that had no names. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," Kate announced over the fleet-wide communication channel. "Today we fight not just for our own survival, but for the survival of reality itself. The enemy wants to reduce all existence to empty void. We will not let that happen." The battle began when Captain Cole's dreadnought opened the first dimensional gateway. The UES Revelation phased into the deep seventh dimension, its weapons immediately targeting the nearest Devourer formation. The dimensional phase. Cannons fired streams of energy that crossed between realities, striking the geometric enemies from directions they could not defend against. Several Devourers were destroyed in the first volley, their forms dissolving into scattered particles of dark matter. But the enemy responded quickly. Reality storms began forming around the human fleet, zones where gravity pointed in all directions at once and time moved backwards. The storms were designed to tear the human ships apart from the inside. Captain Cole ordered evasive maneuvers, his ship dancing between the reality storms with movements that would have been impossible in normal space. The Revelation's crew had trained for years in dimensional combat, and their experience showed as they avoided trap after trap. Lucy Chen's Wraith Squadron performed the impossible, appearing behind enemy lines through dimensional folds that bent space like origami. Her fighters were equipped with the new dimensional disruption torpedoes, and each successful hit forced a Devourer to solidify long enough for the main fleet to destroy it. "Target locked," Lucy announced as she lined up her shot on a massive Devourer that looked like a pyramid made of liquid metal. "Firing disruption torpedo." The weapon struck the enemy directly, and suddenly the shifting geometric form became solid and real. For the first time, a Devourer was vulnerable to conventional weapons. The alien fleets in normal space immediately opened fire. Crystal ships fired beams of pure light that turned the solid Devourer into glowing gas. Bioships launched living missiles that consumed the enemy's metallic substance. Even the energy beings of the ethereal collective contributed, sending bolts of concentrated thought that disrupted the Devourer's consciousness. The battle spread across multiple dimensions as more human ships joined the fight. Engineer Sam Mitchell's weapons performed perfectly, each dimensional disruption torpedo forcing another enemy to become solid and vulnerable. But the Devourers had one final weapon, the largest of their number, a massive entity that existed in all dimensions at once. Began the process that would collapse the seventh dimension entirely. Space itself started to fold inward like a closing book. If the process completed, every ship in the dimensional battle would be trapped in a void between realities, slowly torn apart by conflicting laws of physics. Commander Alex Turner, who had been observing the battle from his research station, made a desperate decision. His ship, the HFY Discovery, was small and fast, built for exploration rather than combat. But it had one advantage: an experimental dimensional phase drive that could create stable anchors in folding space. "I'm going in," Alex announced over the communication channel. "I can stop the dimensional collapse, but I won't be coming back." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, working from her laboratory on Sanctuary 7, tried to find another solution. "Wait, Alex, let me run the calculations again. There might be another way." "No time," Alex replied, already directing his ship toward the collapsing zone. "Tell my family I did something important." The HFY Discovery flew directly into the heart of the dimensional storm. Alex overloaded his ship's phase drive, creating a massive dimensional anchor that prevented the seventh dimension from collapsing completely. The explosion consumed his ship entirely, but it saved the entire fleet. With the dimensional collapse stopped, engineer Sam Mitchell saw his chance. Working from the Revelation's weapons bay, he reversed the polarity of the dimensional anchors, turning the Devourer's own reality-eating weapon against them. The geometric nightmares found themselves being pulled into the very void they had tried to create, their forms stretched and distorted as they were consumed by the dimensional collapse they had triggered. One by one, the Devourers disappeared into the empty space between realities. The largest Devourer fought against the pull, its massive form shifting through every geometric shape imaginable, but even its power was not enough to resist the reversed dimensional flow. With a sound like reality screaming, it was pulled into the void and destroyed. The remaining Devourers, seeing their greatest weapon turned against them, retreated into the higher dimensions. They were not destroyed, but they were defeated. Admiral Sullivan's fleet had established permanent monitoring stations to prevent their return. The battle was over. Humanity had not only saved the galaxy, but proven that sometimes the species others consider primitive can possess the most advanced capabilities. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council was completely restructured. Humanity was given permanent seats on all military and scientific councils. Captain Morrison was promoted to Admiral and given command of the new Interdimensional Defense Force, a joint organization of human and alien forces. Dr. Webb became the Director of Galactic Xenobiological Studies, working to improve understanding between all species. The aliens who had once mocked humanity now competed to learn from human scientists and engineers. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. Those who laugh at others often do so because they have never faced a challenge that required more than brute force. Humanity's victory came not from superior firepower, but from superior understanding. While other species had built bigger guns, humans had built better ones. While aliens had focused on conquering space, humans had learned to understand it. Though species that others had dismissed as weak had been preparing for a war that no one else even knew was coming. In her final report, Admiral Sullivan wrote, "Today we proved that strength is not measured by the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. True strength comes from knowledge, preparation, and the willingness to explore the unknown while others fear it. The seventh dimension was safe, reality was preserved, and humanity had taken its rightful place as the guardians of galactic civilization. The war was won, but the real work of building a better future was just beginning."